Hello and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. It's the second week of November and I'm Moon Jae-in, joined by a wonderful panel of foreign journalists today. Welcome all to the program. Now, debate over Korea's college admissions process has been reignited once again following the administration's announcement to allow more admissions on the basis of the student's score on the College Scholastic Aptitude Test, or CSAT in short. On this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we sit down with our panel of foreign journalists to talk more about the various issues surrounding Korea's college admissions process and how it compares with the rest of the world. On October 25th, President Moon Jae-in convened a ministerial-level meeting on education reform for the first time since taking office.
정시가 명사는 아닌 줄은 알지만 그래도 지금으로서는 차라리 정시가 수시보다 공정하다라는 입시 당사자들과 학부모들의 목소리에 귀를 기울여야 합니다. 수시에 대한 신뢰가 형성될 때까지 서울의 주요 대학을 중심으로 수시와 정시 비중의 지나친 불균형을 해소할 방안을 조속히 마련해 주기 바랍니다.
So what do you guys know about Korea's college entrance system? I mean, are you aware of the controversies surrounding the government's move to increase the proportion of college admissions based on the CSAT scores?
Yeah, as a journalist, I did cover a lot. I mean, every year when there is the Sunung, that's for us a good story to cover because all the country stops. They ask the planes not to take off during the English test, and the efforts that Korean students put, like basically they sacrifice their childhood to prepare this exam. That's a interesting story to tell. So and about this controversy, what I know is that the current scandal somehow showed to a lot of people that in Korea, because you have like alternative and parallel ways of enter university, people who are rich and wealthy can use this parallel admission system to avoid this exam.
Right, to take advantage of these various avenues to enter college. If you're wealthy, you could take advantage of that, and that was the case shown recently. What about you, Tetsuo?
Yeah, CSAT is literally life-defining test.
Yes.
Yeah, so it determines the future of each student. So it determines which university you will enter and which company you will work at. And also, it determines even the size of the checkbook and also even spouse. Yeah.
Is it comparable to Japan?
Japan is not so competitive compared with Korea. Yeah, because when I come to Korea, I heard in Seoul, it means prestigious universities are so concentrated in Seoul. But in Japan, there is no such a word in Tokyo. So you can find good universities. For example, Kyoto University has produced a lot of Nobel Peace Prize winners. So less concentrated compared with Korea.
Are there examinations that are similar to Korea's CSAT back in your countries? In the US, we have the SATs.
Yeah, and now the ACTs as well, which is more for the Midwest or West Coast, and they're essentially the same thing. The ACT is just also test for science knowledge, whereas the SAT is just math, reading and writing, basically. But there's no regulation in the United States for how much it should matter into your college admissions, and these days some schools don't consider them at all. So,
what about Japan?
So in Japan, if you want to go to a national university, like Tokyo University or Kyoto University, you should take a so-called national center test. But if you want to go to a private university, like Waseda or Keio, you don't have to take a national center test.
So how do you get into, for instance, Waseda University?
So after national center test, you should take a second test at each university of your choice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for instance, for Waseda, you don't need to take the national center test at all, and you just take the second test
that's
given
right.
by the university?
Yes, also a national university, after taking a national center test, you need to take a second test, which is more advanced test at each university of your choice.
So in order for you to go get into a national university, you have an extra step.
Right, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You should take the test twice. Yeah.
To enter French university, it's a bit complicated because it really depends on what type of university and what type of career you want to do. If you want to become an engineer or a businessman, you can enter like these grandes écoles, and the best way, first you have to do a preparatory. For 2 or 3 years, there is a preparatory schools. But if, for example, so the grade you have at the baccalaureate, I mean, of course you need to have good grades, but it doesn't matter so much. What matters is the exam after you will have after these preparatory years. If you want to become a doctor, you enter university. University, anybody can enter. As long as you have the baccalaureate with the lowest grade, you can enter university. So the problem is, the second year exam, like at the end of the first year, then you have an exam, and this exam is extremely difficult. So the system is a bit weird. It's not, there is no one straight way. But what I want to say is that the baccalaureate doesn't matter so much. You can somehow fail, but if you're still a good student and if your grade is good enough, you can still have the career and the university of your choice if you study after.
What's the tuition like in France?
It's free. In most of the school, except for the business school, university is free. My engineering school was free. It's free.
Good for you.
I mean, I think that's the way it should be. I think if there is one direction where a state should invest, it's in the free education for its people.
Now, are people in your respective countries as interested in general about the country's college entrance process as it is here in Korea?
Japan has a lot of income in Korea. So many Japanese people pay a lot of attention to this system. So because Japan has limited natural resources, so human resources is everything. So that's the reason why part of the entrance examination of prestigious universities is kind of ladder to climb up in the society.
In France, it's 1 week. It's a huge deal. When I was a kid, for 1 week, it lasts for 1 week. Not in Korea, it's just 1 day. You have 2 exams a day, for example, math in the morning, geography in the afternoon, philosophy the next morning, and so on. So it's a very, very intense week, and the news cover it every day. So for example, in the morning news or like the afternoon news, they will say, oh, this was the topic in the philosophy exam today. That was very interesting. I mean, it is very interesting. It's still the...
So that's somewhat like Korea.
Yeah, it's a big stuff.
Now, South Korea's college admissions process has undergone many reforms over the years, including changes to the admissions criteria. In fact, Korea's college admissions process has changed 18 times since the country's liberation in 1945. Now, have college admission system undergone changes back home in your countries as well? I know that, Fred, in France, you have a new system being implemented this year.
Exactly. So the system has been staying the same for quite some time, and this is kind of big reform happening now. So instead of having 1 week full of exam at the end of your high school, now it's a mix of like end of the year exam, midterm exam, and as well you grade or like from your professor. I think 10% of your CSAT score will be given. It will be like continuous exam, like week after week by your own professor.
And I know Tetsuo said that the policy has remained the same in the last 20 years in Japan and in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., I would almost approach this as more like different cultural movements that are going on as opposed to laws, because the individual university, from my understanding, even if it's public, which, by the way, if it's public, it's usually mostly still privately funded, they decide how they're admitting people. So some of the trends that I'm seeing is universities that do not want your standardized test scores anymore because there's an issue with people who have more money just doing better on standardized tests. testing. The SAT, which is the biggest standardized testing exam, recently announced that they are adding adversity scores to kind of deal with this issue, which is basically a way of statistically measuring how this person is compared to the rest of their geographic community in terms of, like where do you stand in terms of what percentage of people in your area are on food stamps or like, have parents below a certain income. And that's been very controversial. But all of these are kind of on a case-by-case basis for the university.
Prior to President Moon's latest remarks, a local media poll conducted in September showed that 6 out of 10 South Koreans were leaning more favorably towards CSAT-based college admissions. CSAT exams are conducted once a year, while students can also pursue other avenues of college admissions based on their school records, cover letters, and essays. Do you believe South Korea is taking the right direction by accepting more students into college based on this CSAT score?
I don't think so, because CSAT is a literally life-defining test. It sounds cruel that only one-time test determines everything. So I think comprehensive evaluation is much better. I know that it has a lot of room for the subjectivity. But my colleague has a wife who is a high school teacher. Mm-hmm. She said that comprehensive evaluation is much better because if you focus on CSAT, children of wealthy area has a lot of advantage, much more advantage than children of not wealthy areas, because they can go to private academy, mm-hmm. and they can learn the kind of a technique of solving problems.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So what she's saying is that, having more students enter college based on CSAT works against the less privileged, yeah?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And also, it takes time for each teacher to write a cover evaluation of each student. But she said that the comprehensive evaluation is much better.
But the problem is in Korea you have either the CSAT or there is no comprehensive evaluation. There is CSAT or this parallel admission system. And what you see in practice, what's happening is that wealthy families that can use their connection, their money, to help their children to get fake internship, fake certificate, fake achievement that they can use later to enter university. And children from families with poor background, they don't have this connection and this money, so they have to do this exam, this test. And I think what I like about CSAT is that it's a great equalizer. The day of the test, everybody is in front of its sheet of paper, and you have to do the test. And of course, there is a lot of flaws, and I hope that Korea change the test itself, so that it maybe doesn't become such a life-defining moment. Maybe like in France, make it for several days, maybe not a multiple questionnaire. But I really don't like the parallel admission system. Initially, I think the intentions were good, mm-hmm. but I think it was cheated and it was used by as a loophole for some families.
Kelly?
I have a lot to say about this. So historically, from my understanding, CSAT and a lot of standardized tests around the world were made to be an equalizer and to evaluate everyone in the same way. I personally believe that standardized testing is extremely limited and should not be the only thing that we use to measure people. First of all, there's a question of, like we talked about, what is the test and how is it interpreted? If it's multiple choice, that really does limit your view of people. But also, what is it testing for? So I have an issue with this. Coming from the point of being an equalizer or like stopping nepotism and corruption, I think the Moon Jae-in administration's solution here to increase the ratio of people who are just admitted based on the score is kind of a misguided Band-Aid solution. And the reason for that is absolutely, like, a comprehensive evaluation does give the opportunity to basically, make up internships, drop connections, name drop, things like that. But as Sakabe mentioned, the standardized test system puts so much importance on something that is still an economic factor. I mean, people pay crazy amounts of money to go to academies to take these tests well. That's not an indication that they're intelligent, right? It's that they can take this test very well. And so you have an issue where people are still being advantaged because their parents can shell out money. There's also issues of, in terms of background life stressors. Do you even have the time or the privilege to be studying that much? Do you have the low stress levels to take the test well that day? Like, you don't know what's going on at home. So I just feel like this very black and white system for measuring people is another missed opportunity. The comprehensive system too. There needs to be some kind of overhaul or balance, I think, and I oppositely am more so in the camp of what's happening with a lot of elite universities in the US, which is to stop considering standardized testing in general or to adjust standardized testing to have some kind of adversity score.
Regardless of the changes in the system, one factor is constant, and namely the stress and anxiety that many students go through, which has garnered significant coverage from the foreign press over the years. Now, are high school students in your respective countries also under such a lot of stress and anxiety over college, or is this something very unique to South Korea?
Yeah, I think Japanese students are under less pressure compared with Korean students. So many Japanese students are taking a balance between getting good scores and also doing club activities. For example, playing the musical instrumental and playing sport. And also in Japan, so craftsman spirit is respected. So even sushi chef gain more respect than the graduate of Tokyo University.
Oh, I can relate to that. Yeah.
So that's the reason why. So I think, of course, Japan is very competitive, but compared with Korea, it has much more diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think France is exactly the same. I mean, there is many ways to have a successful life without entering the best school. There is many interesting jobs you can have by not going to the best university. And so, I mean, for some students there is pressure, because for some students, if you want to become an engineer, for example, you need good grades, so you will study hard. But for most of the students, there is not so much stress. I mean, I remember being very stressed. I saw my brother would study like 2 weeks before the exam and got decent grades. And even if you don't have good grades, it's not the end of the world. So.
This is a very loaded comparison, the US and South Korea, because I would argue that they're almost as stressful, but for very different reasons. So in the US, you won't see news articles about children dying by suicide because they didn't get a good SAT score, right? But at the same time, in the United States, the price of tuition is so steep that the pressure is really on a lot of young people, especially if they are lower middle class or poor. Basically, you have this trap where, like, if you are poor, you need to be one of the top 1% performing students to get into these schools. The number of schools in the United States that are 100% need met, meaning they'll bridge the gap for whatever you can't pay, and 100% need blind, meaning they won't factor in how much money your parents make to admit you, is very small. So we're talking about the most elite universities. I can say anecdotally, when I was applying to college, I did not get into some schools that had like 70% admission rates, and I was in the top, like near the top of my class. And I actually called them and said, why wouldn't you let me in? And they said, well, your parents wouldn't be able to pay for it anyway. So this is the thing, is that they are factoring in whether or not you even deserve an acceptance seat, because can you pay for it or not? And that's because the cost is so steep. So I would argue in the US, you're in this trap where it's like either you have money and it doesn't matter where you go, or you don't, and you basically don't go unless you have the best scores, the best sports performance, the best grades. And when I'm talking about the people who don't, I'm talking about people who don't have $25,000 a year to spend.
Right, so for different reasons, but just as much under a lot of stress as South Korea. Now, the desire of parents to get their children into elite universities isn't limited to South Korea. Back in March, a massive college admissions scandal broke out in the U.S. involving many wealthy parents, brokers, and university faculty members. a total of 51 people were indicted, and it was discovered that more than $25 million had been paid in bribes. The scale of this, Kelly, tell us.
Yeah, I mean, this is still an ongoing topic. I see news articles about it in the US every single day. The interesting thing about this scandal is you're talking about a lot of people getting caught in this federal investigation, but there are certain faces of it, celebrities. Felicity Huffman, who's an actress, Lori Loughlin, who's an actress that a lot of people my age grew up with, were caught basically, funneling thousands of dollars into gaming the system for their kids. I think it resonates with Americans so much because of the dire state, if you will, that our education system is in. No matter how much money you make in America, college is expensive for you. If you're rich and your kid's going to an average university, it's still $120,000 for a degree at least, right? More like $200, $250 if they go to like a better school. So no matter how much money you have, it's already a financial issue. So everyone can relate to this idea of people gaming a system to get these coveted admissions, to get these coveted scholarships, to take up space in schools that can actually afford to pay for poor students. So yeah, it's a huge problem.
But can I ask you a question? I mean, you mentioned the fact that if some families, when they make a donation to the school and they can have access, what's the difference between...
Exactly, yeah. So that's the interesting thing about this is that, it's completely legal and seen as kosher or acceptable to make a ridiculous donation and then basically have your kid shoot in. Actually, during this controversy, I can't remember which celebrity, but there's a musician who posted on social media a picture with his daughter and said, my daughter got into this prestigious school all by herself. And he was just trying to make a pithy social media viral quote. I think it was Dr. Dre, actually, the rapper. And people shot back at him because he donated thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to his daughter's university. So did she really get in because she was an amazing student? I don't know them personally, but there is that question there. And I do think that the education system in the US from the preschool level is a business and it's corrupt. So this doesn't surprise me that this is a scandal at all.
Now, so what is driving this fever to get a college education? According to a local poll, many respondents said securing a job was their primary reason for pursuing a post-secondary education. Now, do you believe college education is an absolute must in order to land a good job? So you mentioned craftsmanship in Japan.
Yeah, but we are living in the era of Industry 4.0, so we can need to learn what AI cannot do. So unfortunately, it is better for us to go to university.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It really helps. You can always have in France now we have the entrepreneur named Xavier Niel, who is very rich. He's kind of the French Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't go, he's a university dropout, but you don't have so many cases like this. It really helps to have a degree.
Yeah.
In the US, I believe, if you're looking for white-collar office jobs, you still have to go to college. The interesting thing is, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you go to college, you get a great salary or that you're even employed. We have a huge issue with this in the States. I know anecdotally, I have a friend that dropped out and he paints wind turbines and he makes way more money than I do. Some people would argue, okay, well, what happens when he doesn't do that for work anymore? He can't go get an office job because it requires a bachelor's degree, and I have that, right? But certainly, especially in trades, there's a lot of opportunity to make way more money than I did, for sure, and not be in debt like I am.
Well, journalists don't make the most money, Kelly, so you
That's
know.
true. No, he makes
all with
good
you on
money.
this.
Yeah, he makes good money, yeah.
So for our final question, if you could summarize today's discussion as a news headline, what would it be? I'm going to start with Fred.
I would say how to make access to education more equal. Question mark.
Yes. Our Fred is always coming from a fairness and equal perspective.
It's important.
Yeah. Kelly?
Mine was similar. It was just how to take money out of school.
So build a far-sighted policy on education, not short-sighted.
Right. And that wraps up our discussion on Korea's college admissions process. We'll be back next week for another discussion on the latest issues making headlines. So don't forget to tune in then. Thank you for watching and bye-bye.